The headline for this video is, I guess, somewhat obvious by now, but we have just closed another funding round for TALA. Now, the reason I really wanted to do this was because there is literally no information out there on this. I just want to increase the transparency at every stage that I go through, because that's all I can report back on, really. The majority of the large businesses that you use every day in all different walks of life started and raised funds at some point along the way. But this is an entire industry that is currently being occupied by one set of people. Almost all of those have been made, run, scaled by only men, but like we really are creating a world in the image of only one set of people when we are only giving funding to one set of people. I want to hear about people's funding rounds. Like I want you to message when you've just closed one and like talk to me about it, and like I want people to get excited for other people's business journeys, and I think we do online, but probably only when it looks like really aesthetic and cute. What's up, and welcome back to my channel. This is so weird because this is a YouTube video, not a podcast, and I feel like for so long now I've done primarily podcast episodes every week, but this is very visual heavy, so I thought definitely best to keep it on YouTube and on YouTube only. This is a very visual video. I'm going to be taking you through the pitch deck for our latest funding round, and I'm just going to whiz through it. The headline for this video is, I guess, somewhat obvious by now, but we have just closed another funding round for TALA. This is our second ever funding round. Our previous one we started 3 years ago and closed about 2.5 years ago now. And back then, I really wanted to do a full video, basically just going through the exact pitch deck that we used for the funding round. Now, the reason I really wanted to do this was because there is literally no information out there on this, or I find at the very least you get a lot of information on like the pitch decks for like Airbnb or these companies that have essentially raised millions and millions, or you see pitch decks of companies that didn't make it. And I feel like I just want to increase the transparency at every stage that I go through, because that's all I can report back on, really. Ultimately, there is just nothing out there, and the less information there is out there, the higher the barriers to entry are for literally everyone trying to come into the space. So I will give somewhat of an introduction to what a funding round is and a pitch deck and all of that. But it is worth saying that I did this video for our seed round, which was actually kind of in between seed and series A, which essentially seed is like at the very beginning of a business's life. Pre-seed is before you've even made any revenue or even kind of proven the idea. So it goes pre-seed, seed, series A, series B, etc., etc. And it's somewhat different based on which type of funding you receive. That's generally what you refer to in the like venture capital and private equity space, which is the space that I've raised funding from. But it's worth saying that if you haven't watched the previous video and you are going to raise funding for the first ever time, then that one will be far more helpful, because that was earlier on in the business's journey, and a lot of that was about kind of proving the concept, which obviously we've got in here as well, but here was very much about proving what the business has done, and therefore how we can use those conclusions to build on where we're going to get to, and how we've modeled like the next 3 years of growth based on what we've already done. So if you don't have that data, it's going to be much more worth looking at the previous video if you haven't watched that. However, that being said, even if you might not be at Series A, I would I wish I had been able to watch this 3 years ago, because it really would have put in good stead like exactly what data I want to be able to present to incoming investors at this stage of the business. So I don't know, I always think that the best mentorship you can ever get is like a few steps ahead of you, rather than like, sure, everyone wants, I don't know, someone like Elon Musk or Oprah or like Emma Grede as a mentor, but ultimately if they're not just a few steps ahead of you, then they're probably so far from the issues that you're currently facing in terms of hiring, in terms of inventory spend, in terms of all of these different things, and you're much better off getting inspiration from those people, but actually spending time talking as much as possible or learning from as much as possible the people who are a few stages ahead of you. And hopefully we haven't even touched the surface of where we're going, so I hope to be able to give some of that information for people who might be at this stage or a few stages earlier or whatever it might be. But yeah, that's why I wanted to do this video. I still get messages probably weekly about the previous funding round video. basically just asking questions on funding rounds and saying that the setup was helpful and all of that. So I just wanted to do it again. I know it's probably not a super commercial video to be doing, but I don't give a flying fuck because there's zero information out there on how to raise funding or what it looks like raising funding or what the process looks like. Anyway, I'll stop gabbing on. Well, actually I won't, because this whole video is going to be me doing exactly that. But I'm going to get to the actual deck. So I've put chapters in the video in case you want to skip ahead because you don't care about the rest of it. But I do hope this is helpful, and I do hope, like, my whole aim generally is just for more people to share more, because this old boys club of the kind of funding world, which it truly, truly still is. If you haven't heard me say that only 2% of venture capital funding goes to women, then you probably haven't heard me say anything, because actually that's the first thing I say every morning. But it's just like, things stay old boys clubs and stay exclusive and stay with high barriers to entry until people start disrupting that, and until people start being like, actually, this was my experience, and actually, this is how you get into this room, and this is how you talk to these people, and like all of this. And it's worth saying that I come from a huge position of privilege here. So whilst I am a woman, yes, I'm a white, privately educated woman who also went to Oxford, and there's probably somewhat of a more approachability when it comes to this, which is already an old boys club where I do tick some of those boxes. So it's worth saying that, like, I'm very aware of the fact that there will still be nuances. I can't change that, but what I can change is hopefully every single room that I get into or every stage that I go through. If I can share as much information about that stage, then my aim is that it demystifies and breaks down the barriers for anyone else who might want to be getting into that position, whether they are from my background or a different background or whatever it might be. Because ultimately, yeah, as I said, I can't change that, but what I can change is the information that I put out, and hopefully just trying to be as transparent as possible. That being said, this deck is redacted because I don't want to be sued. And I can't share all of this information, but I have at the very least summarized what the information said, if it isn't able to be shared, because we obviously just can't share all of our information. So TLDR, before we get into slide 1, this was the funding round for our Series A. We have previously done a seed. To explain the difference, a seed round is really the money to get the business started into its like scaling stage. So going from startup to scale up generally is what I would say. Pre-seed is even earlier than that. Often that's when it's like at ideation concept stage before it even gets to seed. And then Series A is very much like reserved for a business that's already proven its product market fit and is looking for capital to carry out big projects like international expansion or channel expansion or product range expansion. All of these ones could be addressed earlier on, and I'll talk about the like nuances between what that looked like in our last round and what that looks like now. But yeah, just worth saying that that is the difference. So slide 1, going straight into it, this is purely the title slide, but some of these things are very worth talking about. It's a little bit more of a grown-up deck this time round. As I said, like, the business has already proved itself numbers-wise for an investor, so this was really to kind of consolidate that, show how we've done that, and show how we're going to take it to the next level, rather than last time, which I would say was more of a concentration on like the magic of a brand, because that's more what we had to stand on than like really effective numbers. Like, don't get me wrong, it had been successful for the first few years, but it had definitely proven itself less, especially in terms of things like how it can scale beyond me as a founder. Obviously, I started it somewhat as an influencer business, so a lot of that was kind of leaning on the magic of kind of, you know, when you're looking at an apparel business or you're looking at consumer in general, a lot of that excitement comes from brand and why people like that brand over other brands, and that still stays important as you go through the business's journey. But really at this stage we were able to so heavily lean on like how we've proven this, and even if this isn't a brand for you, which especially when you're talking about like a women's product business, you are often going into rooms with no women when it comes to investment committees and yeah, general different funds, very sadly, and that absolutely has to change, but like just to state that. So that's another like reason why I talk about the funding gap all the time, is that like if I see a business and I think, oh my God, I wish I had that business, then I'm more likely to invest in it. That means that if a room is filled with only men from a single demographic, then they are unlikely to invest in businesses that they don't see the need for because they are not the target customer. So that's definitely a thread that ran through from last deck to this deck as well, because I wanted to make sure it was really proven, like, even if you don't see the value in this, it's very clear that our customers do, and here are all the numbers that show that. But we wanted to lean on that even more. I would say as well that it's worth saying that the funding gap gets worse and worse as you go up through investment stages and raise larger amounts of money. So we really wanted to lean on kind of irrefutable evidence that this was a good business. That was very much something that we focused on in a lot of our conversations, because we were fortunate enough to have a number of different term sheets, which essentially is like offers of investment. And it's always going to be the case that some people you speak to are going to get you great money and great investment, but aren't necessarily going to be aligned in a number of things, especially for TALA. We are very hot on caring about sustainability and caring about the type of business we're going to build. And the bigger we get just from businesses I've seen grow, the more tendency there is for investors to come in and be like, that doesn't really matter. And like, that was never going to run for me. So that was what we spent a lot of the time in the room talking about, because I wasn't about to sign this deal with investors who were then going to want to compromise all of that afterwards. And another part of that is that that's exactly why I've been conscious to never raise more than, like, a lot of people have this kind of ethos of like, go into a funding round, raise as much as you physically can so that you don't need to start raising again. But I'm also super conscious of dilution, which is essentially like how much of the company you own, and making sure that where there is dilution, it goes to the right people who have the same ethos as us and care about the same things when it comes to like what makes TALA special. But also I still own a significant majority of the business. And so there is no point us creating a board where we are going to be like arguing the whole time about how important something like sustainability is, when in my opinion that is the core of the business and the core of what makes us special. Like, our whole thing has been about disrupting the mass market by getting better options, under the assumption that that should be the norm within the fashion industry. All that for me to blabber the fuck on about the fact that that is just a title slide. So just make sure that you've got some contact details on there. And we also directed to the website and the Instagram, because that kind of spoke for ourselves more than last round. And last round, to be totally honest, like, we were not receiving good engagement around the time we were raising, and I like didn't really want to direct people to socials, so I made that like stay in the deck, whereas this time that's not the case, and we've come a long way in terms of like how we position ourselves and how we are online and everything. So was very happy to put that up. But you generally do want them to be able to find you everywhere, get a feel for your brand, get a feel for what your customer thinks. Then going into the About TALA slide, this is kind of what I've mentioned already. I wanted to be very, very clear on who and what we are. There's probably a misconception that investors always know about every type of business that they might be investing in. And don't get me wrong, I don't really think we would ever choose investors that don't know what they're doing in this type of business, but particularly talking to investors within the fashion space, for example, a lot of the time they've put things like sustainability as like a sprinkle on top. Like, that's just been how sustainability has been approached in the fashion industry. So what I really wanted for this slide was just to state, like, loud and proud, and just like a good storytelling introduction on who the brand is. If you haven't shopped TALA already, or you don't know TALA or haven't heard of it, then who are we? And a little bit of storytelling in that too. Like, it's not aimed to be like the driest thing, like we are this, we are whatever. I wanted to give a little bit of a feel of the brand. So this is kind of like an executive summary, both of the deck and the journey we've had so far, and of the brand itself. And we go into this little boasting slide, which is all about me. Now, it is worth saying that there is a widely held view that people invest in people, right? Like, yes, people absolutely invest in good businesses, and the further down the line you get, the more likelihood the investment is purely because the business is incredible. Like, at pre-seed or seed stage, you could very much invest in like a moonshot, which is just someone you think is going to do something great, and even if it doesn't end up being this particular business, they might turn it into something that ends up doing great and all of that. People very much invest in people because there have been so many businesses out there that pretty much do the same thing, and the approach of the person to the business and how they scale the business and also their ethos is what makes that individual business special. So this is a slide all about me, saying the things I have did and the stories I have told, and some press. But we do as well go into the leadership team later in the deck, because I mean, this is definitely something that I'm always looking for when I'm investing in businesses, although I invest at a much lower level than the way VCs do, is who else is running the business? Like, what happens if you leave? Like, what happens if someone else leaves? Like, that for us was particularly important to point out as well at TALA, because we are, like, the large majority of our leadership positions are held by women, and we believe that's important as a company that makes clothing for women. So I go into that later in the deck, but it is very, very important to have all of that detail and experience, etc., so that they know who is running the business that they are essentially going to be, like, leaving their money in the hands of to make more money. While I'm on that topic, actually, one of the best things someone told me, I remember in our first funding round being like, oh, you know, I feel so lucky that they've invested in us and all of this. And, like, don't get me wrong, that is absolutely the case. But it's worth saying that when an investor is looking to invest, like whether angel, more likely institutional, so venture capital, private equity, etc., it is their job to deploy that money. Essentially, every year or every funding horizon, they have like a big pot of money that it is their job to put into businesses. Like, they can't underspend on budget. It's not like, oh, I saved this much this year because I didn't put that into any businesses. That would not be good. Like, the whole function of their business is to put money into other businesses that then do the work and build into more money, and they get a return on it. So it's just worth saying as well that, like, as someone explained to me at that time, like, they should be thanking you for making them rich. And, like, obviously that comes with caveats, and obviously it is a huge privilege to be able to raise investment, but to be able to build a good business that is investable is doing a favor to the people that need to deploy the cash too. And the reason I bring that up is because you kind of have to have that air in your pitch deck too. Like, you don't want your pitch deck to be like, please invest in me. Like, you're not a charity, unless you are a charity, in which case you might be listening to this about raising funding, and my sister works for a charity and we talk about this thing all the time. But if you are not a charity, it's not about you being like, please give me the money, as much as it is a huge privilege to receive funding. You're basically proving to someone why your business is a good place for them to leave their money, while you do the hard work to turn that money into more money. And so when you start looking at each pitch deck you've created with that in mind, it's almost like looking at it like you've created a little, like, stocks and shares ISA for someone, and you're basically saying, this is what return we've created before, this is why people really like it, this is why so many people are here, like all of like so many other people have invested in this little ISA, whatever it might be. Like, you are giving someone an opportunity to make more money, which you are going to do the hard work to get to. And unless it's angel investing, it's not their own money. It's money that they have to deploy. So that was really useful for me as well in, like, going into these pitch meetings, because I was kind of like, it just flips the script a little bit in your head. I do think it's really, like, obviously it's incredibly hard to raise money. I think it really weighs on you mentally as well if you're going into a room and you're essentially begging someone for money as if it is like a charity. You're not doing that. You're telling someone there is a great opportunity for them to sit back, relax, and you make them more money by essentially just giving you the capital you need to be able to turn that into more money. Your goals are aligned. Like, your goals are to make that business a great business and to get a great return. So I just found that useful mentally when going into these meetings, because I was kind of like, it's not me being like, please give us money, we need it. It's us being like, hey, this is a great opportunity for you to leave your money with us and we're going to make it into more. That's all I'll say on that, she says after 10 minutes of talking. So the next slide is important for us because, just some background in case you don't know, in the 2010s, there was this huge D2C, direct to consumer boom. Like, businesses everywhere started selling mattresses and beds and glasses and all of these things for the first ever time online, basically with a kind of pay to play model. So you could put money in Facebook ads and without a doubt you would have a pretty profitable growing business. Like, you could basically just spend money to be the biggest business out there. That kind of broke after the 2010s because people started realizing that performance marketing on things like Meta was working like that, and people were building IPO level businesses, which is kind of public level businesses that list on the stock market, purely by literally buying ads. So they got really expensive, and that's how we've evened out kind of nowadays in the fact that you can't just build a business based on buying ads. So what happened after that boom is there was obviously this huge withdrawal from D2C businesses, because once they were this kind of like silver bullet heyday of just put your money into these ads and you'll make a huge business that's profitable and grows every year, to people then being terrified of that, because obviously what happens in a boom and bust cycle is in the last few investments, a lot of them go wrong. So what it was important for us here was to show in a kind of tongue-in-cheek and TALA way how we are not just one of those brands that someone set up purely based on working out the basket economics of how to sell a mattress online and put lots of spend behind it and always be able to make a profit. We wanted to show this by a number of different metrics, but also I feel like a lot of what makes TALA special is that it's genuinely built every day by women who want the pieces that TALA creates. Rather than people who, for example, left business school and just decided this is a good metric business and therefore we will build it. The difference there, both are very valid reasons to start a business, and I will never like poo-poo someone for starting a business because it's a good business to start at all. Like, I think that is incredibly smart. But what happens here is that actually like consumer goods have really fluctuated as businesses over the past few years. And if it is only built on metrics, then you get into a bit of a sticky situation when you stop being able to scale based on that particular method, like that particular channel stops working. So we wanted to show why we weren't that. So you should never do this in a presentation, but I'm going to read you through the parts on this slide. So first, we were built by engaging a very large audience, listening to what they needed and achieving explosive results on day one. So just like a big intro, essentially saying, even at the start of the business journey, the concept had a huge amount of engagement based on the fact that, I mean, I started it as an influencer brand. We took a very large audience. We created a product that fit that specific market, and then we continually listen to them in terms of moving forwards. Now, this is obviously something that is particularly unique to my business, and I'm under no impression that everyone gets to start with this. There are obviously challenges to start with that, in that you have to suddenly operate like a big business despite having never operated a day in your life before launch, which basically nearly killed us at one point. But that is obviously a selling point, and you should be going all in on your selling points on your pitch decks. We weren't built in the lecture hall of an MBA program in search of false price arbitrage. So this is kind of what I was discussing. Like, we weren't built purely because we were like, oh yeah, this is a good business to build because basket economics means that every purchase leads to this, and that's great, essentially. Because again, when those metrics break, the business breaks if you don't know the product or haven't built a good enough business to kind of evolve it from there. The next point is about traction on organic socials. So in last round, we set a few targets basically, but some of the biggest ones for myself in particular were to make sure that by next round, this was built into a business that very clearly and statistically, like looking at the pure metrics, was not reliant on me and was not scaled because of me, because that's a merch company. And we've spent a huge amount of time building that out in multiple different channels, but also proving that, because I mean, ultimately venture capital would never invest in this business if it was capped at me. Otherwise that would just be the biggest risk in the world. And also it would cap at my level, which is much lower saturation than businesses ever want to reach, especially when they're in VC. So just one metric, so CM2 being greater than customer acquisition cost on first purchase. This was a metric that we concentrated on a lot, just in case you're particularly interested in this, I do think it's worth being interested in if you do have a consumer business. CM2 is contribution margin 2. I will whiz over this, don't worry, it's not going to be incredibly boring. CM2 is essentially the money you are left with after all of the costs to fulfill an order are deducted. So fulfillment, the product itself, etc., etc. Now, CM2 being greater than customer acquisition cost, we found was just a metric that private equity in particular were looking at a lot. So we wanted to make sure that we were very clear in right at the beginning of the deck, basically being like, we tick that box, don't worry. Because again, you can have the best brand in the world, but from experience with investing in businesses, the second I see good numbers, I'm on a good kind of trajectory. I would always rather see good numbers before I see anything else. And that is just human nature based on the fact that you're putting money into something and you want it to make more money. Otherwise you wouldn't be investing. So again, this was to prove that we weren't built on a shallow slope of Facebook ads with the inevitable skyrocketing customer acquisition costs. Again, we're not a business that's been built purely on Facebook ads, because that is where you get into incredible risks where Facebook changes anything about their ads. And then just the last one, like a really important thing about TALA. So we're founded and led by a team with decades of experience in fashion brands and a unique skill and passion for engaging with customers and audiences, and producing exceptional product. So again, just being like what makes us as a business different from every single competitor business out there? Essentially, you're saying, why should you bet on me and this business over every single other competitor? Because also there is a likelihood that as soon as businesses start talking to you, when they're going to look at the competitor landscape, if they see another business that's doing better, they may well start talking to that business. It's worth saying that funds often don't invest in competing businesses. Like often the portfolio business, so the company they're already invested in, has a veto, or it's generally polite to have a veto over another business being invested in that's a competitor, because you get information on the business. So you basically would be able to build two businesses with the same information, which just wouldn't be in anyone's interest. So it's worth really hammering home, why would an investor invest in me and my business over every single competitor? And a spoiler alert is that if you don't know why, you probably need some more USPs, or at least to work on what you say your USPs are. Because sometimes you don't even know why someone would invest in you over another competitor business. And that is kind of a recipe for disaster, and kind of those companies that we've seen when suddenly there's like 3,000 of the same type of company, and ultimately then none of them can really break through. So I would make sure you have absolutely answered that question non-negotiably throughout the deck. Then straight into the numbers. I said with this deck that we concentrated a lot on numbers over anything else, just because that's the stage of the business we're at. Just being completely transparent, I have no doubt that someone will listen to this and be like, okay, well that means you care about numbers more. And what I'd say to that is that I'm just going to be completely transparent with this, and you have to know your audience. Like, the audience here is concerned about money, and they believe that better brand leads to better money. But again, it's not a charity. So I know that some people will watch this and be like, well, your concentration isn't on brand or sustainability or any of these things anymore. I'm just like, I can completely understand why you would think that from looking at a pitch deck further along the way. But if you look at any pitch deck further along, what you'll start to see is that like more and more of the concentration, not in the day-to-day running of the business, but in purely the going for investment side of the business, is focused on those metrics. Because when you are giving more money for less equity, you are going to be more and more and more concerned with just whether it's a good business, especially if it's like you're 5 years in. If you haven't proven this is a good business yet, then maybe we don't want to give our money to you. So that's what I'm going to say. And as I said, transparency is what I want here. And I have no doubt that by sharing something like this, you're always going to attract people who don't agree with that. But that's fine. I'm sharing my experience. So went straight into the numbers on we've been growing. So this had a graph showing 3-year monthly revenue and order growth. So obviously what you want to show here really is up and to the right, which it very much has been for us. We've nearly doubled every year and we've remained profitable, but this was focused purely on monthly revenue so that they could also see some of the seasonality aspects of the business, because we were raising in a lower season. So it's important for them not to be asking every month, like, what's your monthly recurring revenue, when actually it will be lower than November because December is always bigger, for example. So yeah, this showed a graph with 3-year monthly revenue. And then we also, like, growth can be looked at in a number of different ways. And what we wanted to show here as well is that it wasn't just order growth, like it wasn't just revenue growth, it was also, we basically did this full graph here which has been redacted, but just for you to show what it was. 3-year monthly list size growth, so that is people on all different lists for the business, across every different channel. So social media following, CRM, so things like email, newsletters, and then also that is plotted against customer growth and revenue. So I would just say it's really important to anticipate questions they're going to ask, which is, sure, you've grown in revenue, but how do you know you're not at the top of that saturation point and actually you're just getting more and more money out of the exact same people? Because that's not a growing business. I mean, it might technically be a growing business in terms of the revenue, but you're probably going to hit a wall. So it's been very important for us to show that not only is our revenue growing, but it is growing because our base of people is continuously growing, and therefore we're not getting more and more orders from the same people. As much as we have great repeat rates, we are getting more and more orders because we are reaching more and more people who also want to buy. So it's essentially proving the breadth of the market as well, and how we are appealing to those more and more people every year. Then straight into further KPIs. So as I said, growth can be measured in a number of different ways, and we don't purely measure growth based on revenue. Of course, technically, growth is measured on revenue, but you definitely need to be looking at other metrics so that you can see how, as I said, like, are you growing because you are just like getting more and more out of 5 customers, or is your 5 customers going to 50 customers? And as you're doing that, is each order still making you good money, or are all of your ads, as you scale spend, are they still making you money because the customer acquisition cost hasn't gone up? All of this, I'm so aware there is so much jargon in this. This was always the risk of doing this video because it's just like a lot less friendly than the previous seed round video, but hopefully it's still interesting. I feel like I'm just saying like jargon over and over and over again. But again, this is like, I would have wanted a video with jargon 3 years ago based on this. So hopefully it's helpful. I feel like it's very boring so far. So yeah, growth, showing our growth every year since our last funding horizon, profitability, showing that we've been profitable every year. This is not essential, but it is becoming more and more essential, I will say. When we raised 3 years ago, no one gave a flying fuck about profitability. It was like an added bonus. And now you will not get investment if you're at this stage and you haven't somewhat shown that your basket economics could result in profitability. Yeah, it's like a big change. Then cost per order, CM2 being greater than customer acquisition cost. Our Trustpilot rating, for us, this is something huge. So we don't just track growth in things like revenue. We track like how our Trustpilot rating is improving over time. For example, last round, I think we just hadn't looked at our Trustpilot for ages, which is a mistake I made in both businesses. So when you don't look at your Trustpilot and you don't have a kind of back-end push to people who've had a good experience who write in being like, oh, I love these, blah, 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 and saying, will you leave a review on our Trustpilot, is that you only ever get angry people going to Trustpilot. So we spent a huge amount of work over the past few years making sure that we were working on that as well. Then customer service response time, again, this is something that we measure hugely. Like, we have a mad customer service response time. New customers we've gained, Instagram followers now, traffic that we see, TikTok followers, and our general age range, so we can just show like the demographic of the business. Then what we also wanted to show at this stage was the excitement our customers give us for collections, essentially. A lot of the focus of this deck was to show that we haven't just like taken money from last round and done like more of the same. I think that one of the reasons and the feedback that we received again and again from investors that liked what we'd done and gave us term sheets was that we'd very clearly shown how from like last pitch deck, the things we set out to do and the things we put in our like 3-year plan to get to where we need to get to had all been ticked off, because it's the same as like receiving someone's CV. If you're about to hire that person and you have no data to show that that person actually like did the job they set out to do in their last role. So they might have had responsibilities, but like, did they take the department from this to this? Did they take the revenue from this to this? Like, whatever it might be. This is essentially our CV. Like, this is our CV for the funds. So what we really wanted to show was that like everything we put in last funding round, especially because there were some investors we spoke to again this round, everything we put in last funding round, we actually achieved. Here, we wanted to show as part of that like last round, we were very much a activewear business. And one of my biggest aims with TALA has been to create it into this like problem-solving clothing brand that creates like versatile, flattering, great quality pieces that you can rely on. And that's not just within activewear. And we really found that from things like outerwear absolutely blowing up for us. And instead of it just being like, yes, we do leggings well, it being like, I think one of the reasons why we have this approach to wider clothing ranges is because with activewear, like, you can never be lazy. Say I posted a black legging online, like, it's an influencer wearing a black legging. Why would you buy that black legging over any other businesses? Like, from social media, you can see nothing different about that black legging. And so within activewear, we've never been able to be lazy when it comes to either promotion or product, kind of the versatility and the flatteringness and the quality of a product, because we've had to go above and beyond rather than with purely pretty designs, because some of our designs are like very, very simple, but in like how it fits, how it supports you, how it lasts over time, the fact that our fabrics, like the fabrics that wash 2 times better than cotton and are 2 times softer than cotton, and all of these different things. And we took that approach that we had from activewear and we put it into other ranges. And what I really wanted to show here was that the business last round, despite being a good business in certain aspects and a business that needed a lot of work in other aspects, it was an activewear business. And we proved that we could do activewear. And actually what I wanted to show was that we've spent 2.5 years building out a multitude of categories that have done really well and that our loyal customers have trusted us on. Like the fact that we're able to do something like outerwear or swim, and for customers to immediately trust us with that new category they've never seen from us, says a lot to how they believe we design clothes and how they know our ethos is towards that clothing. Otherwise, you would just wait for a few seasons to see if that approach to swim was really good. So I think this is one of the things that TALA is so fortunate for, is that our customers trust us to go into these new categories, because rather than thinking only, oh, pretty designs, they know that when they're buying a TALA piece, they are getting that quality, flattering, versatility. So yeah, I wanted to show that also like a huge part of a fashion business is being able to source and being able to find new places that make amazing things, because we can have the best activewear range in the world, and if every single other line we go into is terrible quality, then the TALA brand will be associated with terrible quality, which from someone who had some issues at the beginning of the business when it came to that, is something that I absolutely do not want to go near ever again. Now, that's not to say that we will never make mistakes, but for me, one of our biggest selling points is like the way we approach design and the way we approach quality of clothing. So I wanted to show how that had expanded from just active to actually being a full-blown fashion business, and also then allowing expansion from that into new areas, because that's ultimately what makes a business investable, is that we've not hit our ceiling. Next, we talked a lot about organic socials, so gone into press we've received and like more viral social media posts, just showing that we have a number of different channels and here is all of them. And like, we don't even have traditional PR at TALA, for example, and we have been getting some like unbelievable coverage in, actually it wasn't out at this time, but like Vogue has covered us. Like, there have been so many full write-ups from journalists talking about the specific quality of one of our specific pieces. So I really wanted to get that in here. Then a little bit more of a deep dive in terms of our ethos overall. So we break this kind of what would be seen as ESG down into purpose, people, and product, and this is kind of how we really look at it internally. So purpose-wise, like, that comes down to the core mission, which we go for again and again and again, and which is like always on our North Star. We are a women-led brand on a mission to make active, inspired pieces that creates clothes that do not sacrifice performance or fit, but also expanding on this. We believe that more sustainable options should be available at the mass market level. So what I always say with TALA is, if you are looking for inherent sustainability, you should be looking in your own wardrobe. You should be looking at the smallest businesses possible. You should be looking at pre-owned. You should be looking at borrowing, all of this. Now, that is not what TALA is trying to create. What TALA is trying to do is to make sure that at a mass market level, what we have at the moment is we essentially, where it comes to sustainability, we're really happy to tell people, like, you can just not consume anything, or you basically just say you are a consumer and therefore you shop from all of these brands that don't even talk about sustainability, don't approach it in any way. Now, where TALA sits is absolutely not at this end, but it's not at this end either. The aim is to be a kind of middle ground where when you do choose to shop, you have better options in terms of how something was made, the conditions it was made in, the quality of the fabric, how long it's going to last, the sustainability of the fabric, so responsibility of it overall, recycled fabrics, etc., etc. Now, what is very, very important to say, and we've had like hours and hours of discussions with investors, with investment committees, etc., around this, because what I will say is a lot of their insight is it's not even worth talking about sustainability as a fashion business, because you will just get completely slaughtered. And our whole ethos is absolutely, we will get completely slaughtered. We will get far more negative attention for our approach to sustainability and trying to do better than if we didn't talk about it at all. What that doesn't mean is that it's not worth doing. And so we spent a huge amount of time speaking to investors about, but also what we've really established as our ethos is that as long as we're saying what we are doing and what we are not doing and allowing the customer to make the decision for themselves, then we are all good. What we absolutely shouldn't be doing is stamping sustainable on anything. You'll notice that in the past few years, there is nothing that says like, we are sustainable or this is sustainable or anything like that. What we do say is, this is made out of these materials, this is made out of this. We have a 0% to landfill pledge. We only do sales as a way of finding clothing home so that we can fulfill this 0% to landfill pledge. We have a take back circularity program where you can send in your old leggings and etc., etc. So we've really solidified that over the past few years. It's so funny because investors are often like, just like the amount of conversations I've had where investors are basically like, just stop talking about it and like stop trying to do better sustainability, because all of these bigger brands, like activewear or otherwise, never get shit for it because they don't talk about it at all. And ultimately my ethos is that I would rather get a bit of shit for trying to do better options at a mass market level than not do anything at all, even though it is optically less confusing, less complex, less nuanced, and therefore less likely to get shit. But I will say that's one thing that we spent a lot of time on and chose investors that really understood that and did not want to ever make us compromise that type of messaging, and we're super happy for us still to get shit for it as long as we are trying to do a better thing, and just saying what we are doing, saying what we aren't doing, and allowing the customer to make a decision. The breakdown of people in this, we're built on shared values of collaboration. Our suppliers are very much our partners. We only work with ethical accredited factories, and we have a very clear code of conduct for each supply partner that we ever work with. And then going into product with this, showing that we champion quality and durability, but also when making those clothes, we also use the best materials available to us that we can also still create at a more accessible price point, and also our circularity program. And if you've watched the previous video, you'll see this kind of slide again. This is our market positioning. Definitely recommend having this or this type of thing in a pitch deck. Essentially what it does is it shows you versus other competitors. So lots of people do this on like a graph like this, which I believe is called a parallel graph. Did just have to look that up. But the way we actually did it was a Venn diagram, and this is totally up to you. This was quite a unique way of doing it. I hadn't actually seen this before, but we spent a lot of time thinking about where we sit within the industry and why certain celebrity businesses have blown up and why other ones haven't, and why certain activewear brands have blown up and why other ones haven't, and where customer values alignment was, etc., etc. And so we plotted this all on a big diagram. I'm not going to show this to you because I don't want to get any of the brands upset if they believe they are in the wrong placement, but this is our analysis of the industry and kind of sets the tone on where we sit. And again, that big point that I said, why would that investor invest in you over any other competitor business? Because as I said, likelihood is if they see another competitor business in that, they're probably going to go out and see if that business is raising too and try and get some data on that business, but also potentially invest in them if they are genuinely a better business. So just worth bearing that in mind. That concludes the part of the pitch deck that essentially says, who are we and what have we done over the past 3 years? Now, you'll notice that at the beginning, we had some kind of spoiler alerts from like where we are now, so that it didn't start at the very beginning and you've got to get to like slide 13 before you even like work out who the business is or like what we've done. But the next stage of the deck goes into what is next. This is very important, obviously, for why you're fundraising. And I think that weirdly, this is one of the things that I see the most decks that seem to miss this out. Like, why are you getting this money and what are you going to do with this money? To me is like so incredible. Like if you had one thing on your deck, it should essentially be, this is who we are, this is what we've done so far. And then it should be like all of the detail on where we're actually spending the money and why the data we already have shows that this is a good decision to spend the money on that. So this is also what's next page. I'm big on making sure that both internally and with the way we show this to investors, that strategic opportunities are always backed up with data, because you don't like, who says this is the next channel you should do and why? The risk of doing that wrong is huge. And if you get it wrong, then you're going to be in a sticky situation because you're going to spend loads of investment money on something that you haven't even proved like slightly works. So the way this is set up is we essentially say what we're going to do, and then we say why that is the best thing to do and the data we have to support that. So we've highlighted 3 strategic opportunities here, which are essentially outlining what we are going to spend the money on. And why we even need this money in the first place. Then this next slide is what I was just talking about, which is essentially customer research to show why that is the thing we should spend our money on. Again, you are asking someone for money to make their money into more money. They're going to want to know how you're going to do that. And you could just be like, yeah, we're doing these 3 things. But why do you know that those are the right 3 things to do? Like that is really, really important to back up. So this is what we did. And then we just highlighted the 3-year plan. So as part of any investment round, one of the fucking worst parts of it is that you have to model every single part of the business for every single penny spent for the next like 3 years. Usually what's looked at as a kind of funding horizon, it will be different in tech businesses, but this, I'm just saying this for consumer, you'll still need to model, but the horizon might be very, very different. But essentially this shows 3-year planned revenue and KPIs, so key performance indicators, so how we'll know we're succeeding. Essentially, we've just said what we're going to spend the money on, why we're going to spend the money on it, and now we've said, and this is what it's going to look like financially. Then the next slide is just a bit of a deep dive on the team. So this is showing where our backgrounds are, where training is for various different people, and the concentration here is on myself and our CEO. We had more roles highlighted in the previous round, and I think that was actually because we were like 9 people, I'm pretty sure. We were definitely around 10 people, but we weren't much more than that at all. So what we really needed to do last round was show that, yes, we were small, but we were mighty, and these were the specific people we had in place to show that and showing their experience and why they were the right people. Because I think sometimes when you can look into a business that's like 9 people, you might be like, are those 9 people interns, or do those 9 people have a background in building this type of business or this type of product or whatever it might be. But here, because we're a 45 person team, it didn't make sense to highlight every single head of department or whatever it might be. So what we really highlighted was the leadership, which is essentially who you're investing in, because we are the 2 people within the business who also have to like directorially sign off the deal and therefore are committed to executing the deal. So it's worth saying where our background is from, why we are the right people to buy this business. We're not buying it. We own it. I own it. To build this business. And then new slide alert. Not that there haven't been loads of new slide alerts. I don't know why I'm just introducing new slide alert now on the last slide. But this is to show company ownership. Now, this is kind of important at this stage because they need to know, has the business already been fragmented into a million different pieces? And even if they got 4%, for example, they're going to be up against 12 other people who have 4% or whatever it might be. So this is just a cap table, essentially, but saying who owns what part of the business, and therefore dependent on the valuation you give, because in VC generally they set the valuation. That's part of their offer. We would like to give you this much money at this valuation, and therefore it kind of dictates the percentage of the business that they would get. But essentially this is just an overview of like what the cap table looks like now, so that they can see what type of business in terms of the setup itself that they would be investing in. Then we say thank you, because we're nice and polite and we thank people for their time. But just at this stage, I am going to give a big headline summary of the whole thing, and I will put it on screen as well, because I'm going to be doing more work filming this, on breaking this down so it's really easily digestible. Essentially, the pitch deck is split into the following sections. So, beginning of the pitch deck, introducing the business in a number of different ways. The business itself, like what's the ethos, what's the brand, the founder, who they are, who they'd essentially be investing in as a person, and anything else you need. So you'll remember we had the breakdown of like, we're not just a business that started because we thought the metrics were good. Then setting the scene on what you have done so far, or what you have done since your last funding round, which is what we focused on. So we focused on essentially showing the pure numbers since last time we may have talked, or since we started the business, whatever it might be. These are the numbers that we have achieved. We focused on revenue, we focused on profit, we focused on list sizes, but we also broke this down into a number of like cheat sheet KPIs, which I would really recommend doing, because they are going to ask you them. I would recommend as much as possible you want to anticipate questions that you're going to be asked. And also throughout the pitching process, if there are questions you're asked again and again, add it into the pitch deck and make sure that's in there before you send it to the next person. Because a lot of the time, that's the type of thing that can like really get you in. It's also worth saying that like think of any headlines or any huge achievements that you can put in the body of the email itself. For example, like some of the investors I was reaching out to, I was just like, hey, this is TALA, we're raising, and last week we did 1 million in an hour on our new outerwear range, or like whatever it might be. Just like instantly something that makes them open the pitch deck, and you can make that as like your strongest kind of recent achievement. And that's often like when I get angel intros, it's always like, I don't know, it can be something about like who they're connected to, or who the other investors are, or some of their sales, or a viral moment, whatever it might be. Then giving more info on the product, and again, this like comes into what we've done since our last funding round, but going into the product specifically, more details on anything that's important to you as a brand. So for us, that's responsibility, sustainability, and ESG in general. Then where we sit within the market, and then incredibly important, as I said, and surprisingly missed in a lot of decks I see, although rest assured I very rarely see Series A decks because I do not have enough money, but essentially, what is next? What are you spending this money on? Both showing strategically why that is the right thing to do, like have you done customer research, have people been asking for it, blah 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 blah, like have you tried another channel that worked really well and therefore you can basically cut and paste that into this. The 3-year plan, so specifically how every bit of money is being spent, and what the finances should look like over the next 3 years, and then just the kind of admin side of who is on the cap table, so that the investors can see kind of where they would sit within that. So that is it. I feel like there is a potential that this could have been the most boring video ever. However, If it's not boring to you, I'm hoping it's really not boring to you. As I said, I've purely made this because this is what I would have wanted. I'm well aware it's not SEO friendly. It's not friendly to anyone who's not in this particular position. It's not that interesting. But I do think it is important. And so that is why I've spent the time doing it. Not least so that I can look back on this. Because, you know, this could be a little video diary where just like there's one view for the remainder of time and it's me having watched it, hopefully next funding round. Or, you know, maybe we never raise again because we just make so much money and make the biggest business in the world that's just like doing the best thing ever. But yeah, I hope you did enjoy the video. If you've got to this point, I'm so impressed with you and you should raise lots of money because you've got a great attention span. But yeah, I just wanted to say a huge thank you for the support as well. Again, I'm just aware that this is not the most exciting topic. There's so much excitement around like building a brand and kind of being a business owner online, and a lot of this side of things isn't that well known or kind of glamorous or whatever it might be. But this is an entire industry that is currently being occupied by one set of people. And the majority of the large businesses that you use every day in all different walks of life started and raised funds at some point along the way. And that means that almost all of those have been made, run, scaled by only men, because that's who venture capital funding is going to. So like, I know I bang on about this all the time, but like we really are creating a world in the image of only one set of people when we are only giving funding to one set of people. And so anything that can be done to even just like make this a little bit more glamorous, you know, like I want to hear about people's funding rounds. Like I want you to message when you've just closed one and like talk to me about it, and like I want people to get excited for other people's business journeys. And I think we do online, but probably only when it looks like really aesthetic and cute. And if there's one thing I'm not, it's aesthetic and cute. Especially not sitting here for a fucking hour talking about pitch decks. But I hope you really enjoyed it. Do leave any questions down below and I will do my best to answer as many as possible. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful day and good luck if you are pitching and raising. If there is ever anyone I can introduce you to that I have been interacted with, and you can send me a DM and be like, hey, by the way, we've done this revenue, I want to be intro to this person. Like, I will always do it if I see it and it's, you know, you've given me a headline that I can see that that's an appropriate like thing. Like, obviously I can't intro everyone to everyone, but what I absolutely can do is be that connect where that is the right space for you. So I hope this has been helpful. Best of luck to anyone who is at this stage in the journey, or who is wanting to be at this stage in the journey, or who is like looking down on me from their like $1 billion funding round, like waving like the queen. Best of luck to you too.